If everybody would settle down, and Campbell, are you hiding back there somewhere? What we're going to do is what appears to be a logical sequence here is to ask Campbell to present the overview, or what is, I guess, the best overview to all of the next number of items here, transforming biodiversity, agenda item 6. And then we will jump to number 11 with our guest. We will come back then to 7 and 8.
So where are we going from here?
So it's 6, 11, 7, 8.
Bingo.
Okay, so Campbell, what are we up to here?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, look, what I'd like to do, just in starting off this conversation on the next few papers, and also we're fortunate to have Jan Hania from the Next Foundation here to present a bit about the foundation and also a bit about a really transformational project he's involved in, Taranaki Maunga. But leading into that, what I'd like to do is talk through this paper about transforming biodiversity. And in this context, what I really want to do is give a brief overview. In essence, our natural resource management role is a very integrated role, and we know that. But actually, how you play it out across policy, operations, strategy, and science is a really, it's not a simple thing to do necessarily. But in today's papers, I'd like to talk about transforming biodiversity, some of the elements involved in that. I'd like to also talk about the role of policy and how we actually use that in this context around terrestrial biodiversity, speaking specifically about the Regional Pest Management Plan, how we use that particular instrument to drive biodiversity outcomes, and then how that flows down through to the actual operational context and operational delivery through operational plans and things like that. And I'm really just trying to give you a flavour for how you effectively cascade it through from the community outcomes through to the strategy, policy, and down into the actual delivery. And you've got to be careful when you talk about biodiversity and transformational change, because it's a very complex topic, and I don't want to oversimplify that. But if you looked at terrestrial biodiversity, there are two key strategic levers for how we can make a significant difference. One of those is removing the suite of predator pests, which in New Zealand and have a massive impact on biodiversity. And a second strategic lever is absolutely how we use habitat restoration and reconnect the landscape so that native species are actually able to thrive within the landscape itself. So I won't get into detail, you've got the paper. Habitat restoration is really key. We're going to focus though a little bit more as we go through this conversation on predator pest management. And we're going to do that in the context of the current things which are happening around New Zealand, particularly in terms of predator-free NZ 2050. And also some work we're doing and others are doing around the Cape to City project, but also what we're doing is alongside others who are leading it as well, such as the Next Foundation and Zero Invasive Predators. So I'll just come back now to the work. You've had various presentations on Cape to City over the last 2.5 years, and where we're getting to now, and there's still 2.5 years to go on the project, so where we're getting to now though is a much better understanding that actually very low cost predator maintenance on farmland is probably going to be possible. Now there's a range of reasons for that, and I won't get into all the details, we've talked about some of them before, but things like wireless technology for trapping, these are actually going to be game changers in the context of the first strategic lever, which is around predator pest management. And so what we're seeing now is the actual ability to look at our regional pest plan process, which is upcoming. We'll talk about that in the next agenda item, or a couple down the track. We're seeing the opportunity now to actually put the mechanism in place in our regional pest plan, which is our statutory policy instrument, if you like, for biosecurity in this region. And that mechanism is then in place if the community want to pick up and transfer their current possum control areas through to predator control areas and secure that investment long term by them as a community. So in terms of Cape to City and the other things that are happening, we're increasingly confident that low-cost predator control will be possible. We're actually looking now to how do you secure that investment long term through the likes of the Regional Pest Management Plan mechanism. In the last 12 months or so, Predator-Free New Zealand, the 2050, the vision, has actually really, first it's been put out there, but it's really taken a lot of our nation, and people really like the vision. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. It's actually about saving our native species, which will go extinct if we don't get rid of the predator pests in many cases. But it also includes elements along the economic side of things as well. So it actually spans across potentially both the environmental and the economic spectrum in terms of the outcomes that are benefit, and certainly there's cultural outcomes too. So PFNZ 2050, across New Zealand at the moment, different places are sticking their hand up and they're saying, well, we would like to be PFNZ 2050, Dunedin, Wellington, and I think what I would like some guidance from you as councillors in terms of our Hawke's Bay region, whether or not we should seek to align ourselves with PFNZ 2050, and we would be, if we were to do that, we will be the first region to do it. So other towns have done it. And in some cases, sanctuaries or others might have picked it up. But actually, there is an opportunity for you to consider there around whether or not you want to align this council philosophically to that vision of PFNZ 2050. So I'm seeking some guidance from that in this paper. The second part of this picture is that even if we put the mechanism in the regional pest plan to roll out predator control across our already successful possum control program, it's going to require funding and resources to do it, much as it did to get to where we've got in terms of success with possum control. While that will be, while additional funding would and should be a conversation in the long-term plan discussion in terms of additional funding for predator control, and certainly from my perspective, from a staff point of view, we'd look to put up some options for that for you to consider. That'll sit alongside all the other council priorities, obviously, at the time, as it should. But what I would like to do is to signal that I think we can probably make quite a significant difference with our existing resources if we choose to apply them a little differently to perhaps we've done in the past. And this agenda item talks a little bit about that. So this is existing biosecurity funding. What I'm suggesting is that we look to target that into a more strategic, larger scale regional rollout of predator control at key areas in our region where we can drive a difference with that investment. Now that is a little different to how we've done it in the past, and the timing is probably right now. In the past we've often used a lot of this money as seed funding for smaller community groups or initiatives, but some of those now by themselves are actually potentially at a scale where that could be expanded with greater outcome benefits. And the sorts of areas I'm thinking about areas like Lake Whatuma, Whakakī, Mahia, Ahuriri Estuary. All of those areas, if you had a sustained predator control program in them long term, you would drive potentially significant biodiversity outcomes. So I just want to get some guidance from you in principle on that around how we're using existing funding. And I'm seeking that guidance because the quantum I'm talking about is around about 175, 200K, and I don't believe that's even though it's biosecurity funding and existing resources, it's a slightly different approach, and the quantum is significant, and I'd like your thoughts on using that funding in a regional predator control rollout process. So that was probably, in terms of this paper, that was probably the things I wanted to comment on briefly, but happy to take questions.
Leveraging that you...
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we've been very, very fortunate in the last 4 years to have built a strong relationship with the Aotearoa Foundation. That's the first time I've been involved working with the philanthropic sector in my career. What's very interesting is that they invest, at least in the context of the Aotearoa Foundation and others, particularly the bigger philanthropic providers, they invest very much for impact to change the game. Our experience is, and they do it after quite a rigorous business process around what the outcomes are and what are you going to do to get there. So PFNZ 2050 is clearly funded by government. There's money there for regional predator control. but they're looking to pair up and partner with other business and/or philanthropic partners. I think there is a real opportunity if we can structure the investment properly for a transformational investment in knocking down predator pests in the region, and that could be funded by a coalition of perhaps philanthropic partners, perhaps business and council or central government. But that investment sustained long term by the community. But there is absolutely a conversation together around leverage funding to drive impact around the outcomes we're seeking for biodiversity.
Mr. Curtin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much, Campbell, for bringing this. In my mind, this is really the heart of council business, and I'm delighted to see you bringing it in the context that you have. I do have, in the first instance, a detailed question, but then I've got some broader issues questions. Just going to your table on page 12 at paragraph 25, you've got that. You've made a note that the biosecurity base budget of 175,000. Can you just clarify for me whether that's the general funded component or is it the possum control targeted rate for landowners? Can you just clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, so almost without exception, all of the biosecurity budgets are funded 70% targeted rate, 30% general funding. So in this context, it refers to both targeted rate and general funding. So that 175,000 would include a 30% general funding component.
So it's the sum total of our PCA activity, is that correct?
The 175,000 specifically is across a bunch of different biosecurity budgets. So it's across some possum control, it's across some site-specific work,
Sure.
It's across some research work. So it's bringing those together and using them in a different way.
Just to clarify again, if you're planning, and it seems to me you are in this coming year as opposed to the 10-year plan, to migrate from a possum control scenario to a pest control scenario, that we would have to substantially revisit that public good, private gain element. Would that be fair to say we need to unravel that?
So I think as part of this, the long-term conversation on how we fund and where the priorities sit for funding around regional predator control, I think there should be a conversation on is a 30% general funded component a fair reflection of the public good when you go from just possum control to predator control? Because there are greater community good outcomes from an integrated predator control approach.
It would be inappropriate for landowners, farmers throughout the area who are controlling possums to prevent TB to then pick up the tab for general predator control for biodiversity outcomes. Would that be fair?
The comment I'd make on that is recently in the Cape City project we had a survey of a bunch of farmers done within that area, and there was really two clear messages from them. The first one was don't take the throat off possum control. The second one was we are happy to be part of funding predator control if it's recognised that the broader community benefits as well and we're not funding the whole bill.
If you could indulge me, Mr. Chair, just a little further. You're asking and seeking Council's approval to float this publicly through the Regional Pest Management Plan. Do we continue to reinforce the past by taking that approach as opposed to putting it under a biodiversity outcome? In other words, the implication is that we cite this in pest management when in fact it's much bigger than pest management.
So I think in my mind there's two key components. The first is what is the mechanism by which you drive the outcome? And in this case that is partly the Regional Pest Management Plan and being able to have predator control areas long term. But the really important thing is clearly that is just one thing which sits in a bigger strategic context for biodiversity within this region. So I think whether we frame it within the biodiversity strategy, which clearly it's got an important delivery to the outcomes for biodiversity, but the mechanism clearly sits within the regional pest plan.
I disagree with you, but we'll have a discussion about that.
I say that only in the sense that from a statutory point of view, the regional pest plan is the only place we can put a rule in to deliver predator control areas. But that rule sits within the strategic context of biodiversity delivery in the region and how it's applied. Does that make sense?
Council. Councillor Bevan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Campbell, for this paper. I just want to get an understanding. I think probably from a councillor perspective, it's a no-brainer that we'd want to buy into the 2050 vision, and I'm sure that the rest of the community would support that. I just want to get a clearer understanding of the choice that we're being asked to make here, because obviously there's got to be a diversion of funds and a different strategy developed. So in doing that and applying these funds in a different way, I want to understand what we're giving up to do that.
So in reality, frankly, we're not actually giving up a hell of a lot. And the reason I'm saying that is biosecurity budgets, animal pest biosecurity budgets, are substantially targeted towards the predator control suite of pests we're talking about anyway. So possums, mustelids, and feral cats in particular. So we do work on those. It's part of what we do. The research budgets, for example, are span across a whole range of things which relate to substantially predator control. So this suggestion I'm talking about here in terms of existing budgets, frankly, we aren't actually giving up a lot, and what we're doing is opening the door to leverage funding with other partners who might have similar aims. Does that make sense? Yep.
It just confirms what I said at the beginning. It's a no-brainer, if that's the case.
Chair, I'd like to move.
Councillor Graham?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Well, I had another query, Mr. Chair.
Well, you can make your query a comment.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry to rush, Councillor. Sorry about that. But Campbell, I just want to say that as to follow up on Councillor Bevan's thoughts, this is a stunning initiative. I certainly personally, and I know all the councillors around the table, we want to be the market leader in this space. So and we're very lucky to have you and your team driving it, quietly driving it, while we deal with a lot of other stuff around you just get on with it. And you've done a marvellous job, and so's your team. Not only managing pests, but dealing with the business side of this, which has been so important. So I just want to say that we want to be in this space. We want to be the market leader. We want to be the people, the people that everyone else in New Zealand is following. Thanks.
Parker?
I echo the Councillor Graham's comments and say that I think that you can push this council even harder on these issues. I think you'll find there's enormous, really open to being shoved on these issues, in my view. That stems from a strong belief within this council that we have a responsibility for the environment and we need to do better, and we want to do better, and we want to be the best we can be. So I just think you come along and shove us as hard as you like, and I think you'll find very little resistance. It's not an invitation I give to many people, let me tell you that.
Councillor Bailey?
Thank you, Chair. Campbell, I'd just like to say this is not my excited face. This is my very excited face.
Councillor Curtin?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Campbell will know well my enthusiasm for this subject on numerous occasions. However, Campbell, I think, and I haven't had the opportunity to explore this with you, you have highlighted an overarching, wide-scale biodiversity approach. What I haven't seen in this paper is the background work around what are your targeted species and the entire approach that we need to adopt to deliver the outcome. And I know you've linked the various papers that have been presented today around pest management. And if you look carefully at the operational plan for pest management next year and read the outcomes, once again I'm concerned that we are not measuring things that really count for the environment. I'm not interested in the number of complaints that you get. I'm interested to know what the outcome is for, in this case, if you've identified the targeted species that we're aiming at, how are those critters getting on, and what is the outcome for them? Campbell, I would suggest that, and I'm assuming because I didn't get the great opportunity to pursue this on you in questioning, that sitting behind this approach is already a well thought out consideration of the habitat that we're looking to protect, the zone that we're looking to protect them in, the expenditures that the community is likely to stand to make those protective moves. So I'm assuming that that work's done, and there's a clear indication that we've got this big picture in play. Again, we will make the mistake, as we've made with my arguments with you 10 years ago on this subject, of installing a pest management approach that is singular and does not meet environmental outcomes that we seek. So I'm hoping to see that in the next breath, the next tranche of documentation coming through. And finally, Mr. Chair, I've got some reservations about parking this most important, probably the most important and critical element of this council's work, biodiversity, protecting crucial habitat in our region. I'm concerned that we've parked it under the umbrella of pest management when in fact it's a much, much broader approach. I appreciate the need to introduce a rule that does that, but the reality is it deserves a place much more elevated than sitting in pest management, not to diminish your esteemed work. So my comments are, could we think about a broader approach to this? And I note the documentation's already under that umbrella, but then we can migrate that into a broader context. It is that important. I touched briefly in my earlier comments around the funding, and clearly 450,000 is just a joke. We would need 4 times that at least to have the sort of impacts that we need. We need to have an analysis by staff as to what actually is required. And I go back to the particular point which is relevant for the 2017-18 year. If you're asking us to incur costs on a possum control scheme, which are then broadened out to a pest control scheme, that would be unfair to a large number of landowners who pay that cost presently. And I would like to see, before we finalise the annual plan, that you've got some feel, give us, the council, some feel for how we restore equity, if that's what we're doing in the coming year.
So I'd like to make some comments as well. First of all, I would endorse everything that Councillor Curtin has said about the packaging of this. And so, yes, there are all the substantive reasons why we're doing this from a biodiversity standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint, I've always felt exactly the same way, that what the public is interested in is not how many feral cats we kill, it's how many birds and other threatened species we save. And I understand what you're saying about the legalities and so forth, but somehow because of perhaps where this rests in the organization, it always does become a pest discussion and not a biodiversity discussion. So as we head down this path, I would certainly support what Councillor Curtin is driving at. In defense of Campbell on the funding issue, Campbell has grand designs on our treasury, let me assure you, and it is only at my insistence that this paper doesn't present all of those at this point, because I felt the proper place for that to be discussed was in a bigger context of other priorities that we have to consider in the long-term plan. But I think certainly the thinking is behind the curtain there at the moment as to where this might go or what it might entail. as we move forward. So if there aren't any other comments, we have a mover. You would like to make any final comments?
My final comment, I'm very impressed that the chair of the Environmental Committee is having influence on the papers that we're getting. And I too have some sympathy with that, although in my small public around my household, we are very interested in what's getting killed out there. But we understand, of course, that it has a huge biodiversity impact, and that's what we're all looking for. So that's my final comment.
And just to say, the next agenda item will give a bit of preview, I think, of what some of the targets are that we have in mind here. So all those in favor of accepting this report? Aye. Any opposed? Accepted. So let's move now to, thank you. Item 11.